This is The Conservative Edge. I'm Dr. Joe Corey. Today's topic has to do with oil, the price of oil specifically. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no shortage of oil in the world. There is a manufactured shortage. And oil is in abundant supply, but for politics and extreme environmentalism. 88 million barrels are produced every day in the world. So why are Americans lining up to buy gasoline at over $5 a gallon on the average? We will demonstrate that the answer lies in bad economic and political policies. The United States is the largest producer of oil in the world, with 11.2 million barrels per day in 2021. Followed by Russia with 10.1 million and Saudi Arabia with 9.3 million. In 2021, the United States consumed an average of about 19.8 million barrels of petroleum per day, or a total of about 7.22 billion barrels of petroleum annually. The world is awash with oil, ladies and gentlemen. This was an increase of consumption of about 1.6 million barrels per day. Overconsumption in 2020, despite the COVID restrictions. The numbers clearly indicate that America must import oil to meet its consumption need, given the current production level, or it must explore for more oil. I favor the latter. The post-COVID increase in economic activity ushered a significant boost in demand for oil products. This could have been anticipated by policymakers and the supply of oil adjusted. There are at least 97 countries producing oil in the world, with Israel and Morocco at the bottom of the scale, each producing 6,000 barrels daily. It is clear that a growing U.S. economy requires more oil at this juncture of economic development, despite the massive pressures coming from the environmentalists. The current increase in oil prices and shortages are due to numerous factors. We cite here the critical ones. 1. Economic growth. No matter how efficient the new industries are, oil will be consumed at some level. 2. Environmental activism that has been especially woke under the Biden administration. Chief among their successes, what they consider success at least, is the shutting down of the Keystone pipeline, which produced about 830,000 barrels per day, and the arm twisting of the oil and gas industry, and blaming it for the gas price increases and their newest invention, which is outrageous, of the Putin factor. The politics of the moment. The Biden administration is blaming Russia for the increase in oil prices at the pump. This is simply a fallacy. In 2021, the U.S. imported an average of 209,000 barrels per day in crude oil and 500,000 barrels per day of other petroleum products from Russia. Russia accounts for only 8% of the global oil supply. The daily imports from Russia were canceled in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But this is only half of the daily flow from the canceled Keystone pipeline. Biden, all he has to do is recapture the Keystone pipeline, open the spigots. More domestic production would replace Russian oil easily. Furthermore, Russia is not the major supplier of oil into the United States market. Canada is, as it accounts for 61% of U.S. oil imports, followed by Mexico with 10% and Saudi Arabia with 6%. These realities suggest that trying to bribe Iran with a terrible deal for the U.S. and for the numerous Arab countries, and to cuddle the dictators of Venezuela are bad economics and bad politics. They suggest desperation instead of reason. Further, the activation of numerous oil leases in Alaska and elsewhere by reconfiguring production constraints imposed by the U.S. government and the states would easily solve the problem without any of the price increases in the American political scene. The Americans don't have to put up with this. The United States has massive oil reserves if the Biden administration has the will to use them and delay all the new regulation and production limitations of the U.S. sector. The United States oil reserves are you ready for this? 68.8 billion barrels. That's what we have already discovered, and there is much underneath the grounds. Iraq, by contrast, and believe it or not, has 140 billion barrels in reserves, and the Biden administration does not even mention Iraq when the United States lost 4,586 soldiers between 2003 and 2020 in order to preserve Iraq's independence and territorial integrity. Why not negotiate a deal with them? Are we afraid of Iran, who squandered $150 billion we gave them on subversive activities around the world? What are we doing negotiating with them? John Kerry must be fired. The current negotiations with Iran are short-sighted and dangerous to the long-term interests of the United States in the Middle East. This strategy completes the triple negative effect: cut U.S. production, cut the importation of oil from Iran, and cut out Saudi Arabia. Because of the proposed deal with Iran, Saudi Arabia is no longer a supplier, but the president is going there to remedy this. I don't think it's going to work. Furthermore, in 2021, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the United States exported about 8.63 million barrels per day and imported about 8.47 million, making the United States an annual total petroleum net exporter for the second year in a row since at least 1949. The U.S. exported to 176 countries and 4 U.S. territories. They accounted for 35% of total U.S. gross petroleum exports in 2021. The Biden administration has recently sought to limit U.S. export. So, it is okay for the rest of the world to use U.S. oil, but not for the United States? How ridiculous is that? Early export realignment could have reduced the price pressures in the U.S. oil market. Blaming the Russians and the oil companies are superficial and convenient arguments that hide the wacky environmental agenda of the Biden administration. America did not need to buy Russian oil in the first place. It is clear that the woke crowd that is blindly controlling the energy agenda of the United States is wrong, and blaming the Russians is but a cover for their mediocrity. This is what you get when Susan Rice is setting the domestic policy agenda. The fourth reason, the myth that the elimination of fossil fuel as an energy source can be quickly and painlessly achieved. Let us start with the naked reality. Should we achieve the elimination of fossil fuel as an energy source, most of the countries in our hemisphere and even beyond will still be using it massively. There will be an excessive supply of oil in the world, thus dropping the price and encouraging even more fuel use elsewhere. One thing about pollution, it cannot be contained in the atmospheres of a given country. It will migrate. The use of electric cars will massively increase the demand for electricity. This will hasten the demand for nuclear power generation. The woke crowd is opposed to this, yet the Biden administration just decided to recommission 2 nuclear power plants. Fossil fuel today accounts for 61% of the energy sources for electricity generation. It includes 38.3% natural gas and 21.8% coal. We must keep in mind that the hard push by environmentalists could cause the loss of a large number of manufacturing jobs. Different products have different pollution footprints. The production of those with the heaviest footprints will migrate to countries where they are welcome and where the use of fossil fuel is not limited. The environmentalists pushing for electric cars and everything else that moves forget that China is the biggest beneficiary, as most batteries are produced in China, as are many electric car models. Wind accounts for 9.2%, solar for 2.8%, and other renewables account for 20% of the electricity sources. The trends are in favor of these sources, but how fast can they be implemented, and how generally acceptable will they be? Adding corn, for example, as a source of energy has many side effects that have been ignored by the Biden administration. After all, corn is food. We should keep that in mind. The road to the elimination of fossil fuel as an energy source will be a huge challenge before 2050 at the earliest, and this assumes a large reliance on nuclear power as an alternative. Ladies and gentlemen, fossil fuels have been the primary source of energy in this country. President Biden has promised their elimination or massively reducing them as energy sources in his administration. This is simply folly. The innovators of the United States are hard at work to make sure clean energy is possible, but within a realistic time framework. Much improvement in the environment of many American cities has been realized. The American people are delighted. Believe me, I am. However, an enormous task lies ahead, and government regulations are only a part of the answer. American industry and innovators are the answer, but the process will take time. The current approach suggests that the Biden administration believes that eliminating fossil fuel as a matter of flipping a switch. It is not. So they often suggest if you cannot afford to buy gas, then buy an electric car. Now, how stupid is that? This twisted logic is beyond tolerance. Elon Musk has transformed the car industry, but the Americans are not yet truly subscribed, and the cost of the electric car is prohibitive to most. Meanwhile, the transition from fossil fuel is not seamless. The Biden plan has allowed the price of gasoline to get over $5 a gallon and rising, and to allow inflation to rise to 8.5%, on all-time high in 40 years. This is contemptible. The American family spends a considerable portion of their salary on food and energy. Given the inadequate public transportation in most U.S. cities, an American will have to pay for gas to get to work, almost independent of the price. This explains why the demand for gasoline is rather price inelastic. This is simply folly to continue on this road. It is crazy to allow other countries to consume American oil while the Americans are massively restricted in terms of price and availability. American industry are keenly aware of the environmental consequences of their policies. Much innovation is already taking place. The government can set the parameters of energy usage and has already done so. Making them overbearing and very costly to meet could produce adverse reactions. Governor Newsom, I usually don't quote him, but it is something intelligent, did not order that no gas-powered cars can be sold in California within a year or two. His legislation allowed, that gas-powered cars cannot be sold in America after 2035. This gives us room to breathe and maybe sufficient time to adjust. The Biden plan is not allowing for a reasonable transition period into renewables. Americans want cleaner air, but do not want to go bankrupt getting there. It seems like reason and fairness have left the national political debate. We must reset. The future of our country is at stake. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you listening to this show, and I hope not only you will watch, you'll urge others to watch and ask many to subscribe. We only deal with the truth in here, so help us God. Thank you very much.